"Leave him alone!" The words cut through the afternoon air like a blade. No one played with the billionaire's one-legged son. The other children avoided him, whispered about him, laughed at the way his prosthetic leg clicked against the pavement. Until one day, a little girl with worn shoes and fierce eyes decided enough was enough. This is the story of how one act of courage didn't just change two children's lives, it shattered the walls between two broken families and rebuilt them into something extraordinary. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The playground was loud that afternoon, filled with the usual chaos of second graders racing, screaming, playing games that only made sense to 7-year-olds. But in the far corner, away from the noise, a small boy sat alone on a bench. Lucas. He always sat alone. Hazel had noticed him from the first day of school. While other kids formed groups and whispered secrets, Lucas stayed on the edges, his prosthetic legs stretched out in front of him, a book open on his lap that he wasn't really reading.
She'd wanted to talk to him, but something always stopped her. Fear, maybe, or uncertainty. Until today. "Hey, robot leg, why don't you walk home to your fancy mansion?" 3 boys circled Lucas like wolves. The biggest one, a kid named Trevor, shoved Lucas's shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. "Yeah, bet your rich mommy bought you that expensive fake leg because you're too clumsy to keep a real one." Another boy laughed, reaching for Lucas's backpack. Lucas tried to stand, to walk away, but Trevor pushed him down. The boy hit the ground hard, his prosthetic leg twisted at an awkward angle. The laughter got louder, and something inside Hazel snapped. "Leave him alone!" She was running before she knew what she was doing, her worn sneakers pounding against the pavement, her long curly hair flying behind her. She planted herself between Lucas and the bullies, her small frame shaking, but her chin lifted high. Trevor sneered. "What are you going to do about it, Charity Case? Your dad's just a janitor. You probably can't even afford—" "I said, leave him alone." Hazel's voice cracked, but she didn't move. "If you want to be mean to someone, be mean to me, but you're going to have to get through me first." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Trevor laughed nervously. "Whatever. He's not worth it anyway." He backed away, his friends following, their courage evaporating in the face of someone who actually stood her ground. Hazel turned to Lucas, who was still on the ground, staring at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Are you okay?" She held out her hand. Lucas took it, and she helped him up. His hands were shaking. "Why did you do that? Nobody ever—" "Because it's not right," Hazel said simply. "And because I think we could be friends, if you want." For the first time in months, Lucas smiled. Really smiled. "I'd like that." Ryan was waiting outside the school gates at 3:15 like always. He'd finished his afternoon shift at the warehouse early to make sure he could pick up Hazel himself. These moments, seeing her face light up when she spotted him, made every hour of back-breaking work worth it. But today, something was different. Hazel walked toward him with her chin lifted high, but her eyes were unusually bright, her shoulders tight with emotion. "Hey, sweetheart." Ryan knelt down, immediately sensing something had happened. "Are you okay?" Hazel looked up at him, her brown eyes fierce. Some boys were being mean to Lucas. Ryan's mind flashed at the name she'd mentioned before, Lucas, the quiet boy in her class, the one with the prosthetic leg that the other kids avoided. "What happened?" Ryan asked carefully. "They pushed him down," Hazel said, her voice shaking slightly, not with fear but with anger. "They were laughing at his leg, saying terrible things. So I stood between them and Lucas." Ryan's heart clenched. "You did what?" "I stood between them," Hazel repeated, lifting her chin higher. "I told them if they wanted to be mean to someone, they could be mean to me instead. But they weren't so brave when someone actually stood up to them. They left." Ryan pulled his daughter into a tight hug, feeling his chest swell with a complicated mix of pride and fear. Pride that she'd stood up for someone who couldn't defend himself. Fear that the world might crush that beautiful, brave heart of hers. "You did good, baby," Ryan whispered into her hair. "Real good." When Hazel pulled back, her eyes were bright. He asked if he wanted to be friends. He said yes. She paused, then looked up at her father hopefully. Dad, can he come over sometime? He said he never gets to go to anyone's house. Ryan hesitated. Their apartment was small. The furniture was secondhand. The carpet had stains he couldn't get out no matter how hard he scrubbed. But when he looked at Hazel's hopeful face, he couldn't say no. Sure, sweetheart, if his parents say it's okay.
Saturday morning, Lucas arrived. A black car pulled up outside their apartment building. A woman in professional attire, Lucas's nanny, walked him to the door. "You must be Mr. Porter," she said with a polite smile. "I'll be back at 4 to pick him up." Lucas stood there in expensive clothes that looked like they'd never been played in, clutching a backpack, his whole face lit up with excitement. "Mr. Porter, thank you for inviting me." Ryan smiled, ruffling the boy's short brown hair. "Of course, buddy." For the first hour, the kids played in Hazel's room. Ryan could hear their laughter through the thin walls, and it made something warm bloom in his chest. Then Lucas appeared in the kitchen doorway, shy and hesitant. "Mr. Porter, Hazel said you're really good at math. I have a test on Monday, and I'm not very good at it." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Could you maybe help me?" Ryan set down the dish he was washing. "Of course. Come on, let's sit at the table." Lucas pulled out his math homework, and Ryan immediately saw the problem. The work was appropriate for second grade, but Lucas's paper was covered in eraser marks and frustrated scribbles. "Okay, let's look at this one together," Ryan said gently, pointing to a word problem. "What's the question asking?" Lucas stared at it, his shoulders tensing. I don't know. My tutor always says I'm not thinking hard enough." Ryan heard something in the boy's voice. Fear. Shame. He'd heard it before, in his own voice, years ago when he was a kid, being told he'd never amount to anything. "Hey," Ryan waited until Lucas looked up. "There are no wrong answers here. We're just figuring things out together. That's what learning is. So take your time and tell me what you think it's asking." Lucas blinked, surprised, as if kindness in education was something foreign. Slowly, hesitantly, he started working through the problem. Ryan guided him gently, breaking it into smaller steps, celebrating each small victory. When Lucas finally solved a problem on his own, his face transformed. "I did it!" He looked up at Ryan with pure joy. "Mr. Porter, I actually did it!" "You sure did, buddy." Ryan smiled, something tight loosening in his chest. "You're smarter than you think." That became their routine. 3 times a week, the nanny would drop Lucas off at Ryan's apartment. Ryan would help both kids with homework at the kitchen table, make them simple snacks, peanut butter sandwiches, apple slices, whatever he could stretch from his grocery budget. But more than the food, more than the homework help, Ryan gave Lucas something money couldn't buy: acceptance. He never treated Lucas differently because of his prosthetic leg, never pitied him, never made him feel less than. He joked with him the same way he joked with Hazel, corrected him gently when he made mistakes, praised him genuinely when he succeeded. And Lucas soaked it up like a plant that had been dying in the dark, finally getting sunlight. Weeks turned into months. Ryan watched the transformation happen gradually. Lucas started sitting up straighter, speaking with more confidence. When he got a math problem right, he'd beam with pride instead of surprise. Hazel came home with stories almost daily. "Dad, Lucas stood up to Trevor today. He told him his words couldn't hurt him anymore. Lucas volunteered to read in front of the whole class today. He never used to do that. Lucas made another friend. A boy named Colin asked if he could sit with us at lunch." But it was more than just confidence at school. Ryan saw Lucas watching him with Hazel, seeing how a father could be present, could be warm, could make you feel valued. The boy would stare when Ryan asked about Hazel's day and actually listened, when he braided her hair in the mornings, when he made silly voices reading bedtime stories. things Lucas had never experienced. One evening, after Ryan had patiently helped Lucas through a particularly difficult assignment, the boy suddenly stood up and hugged him tight. "Thank you, Mr. Porter," Lucas whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You make me feel like I'm not broken." Ryan's throat closed up. He held the boy close, this child who wasn't his but felt like he could be. "You were never broken, Lucas," Ryan said quietly. "Not for one single second." Meanwhile, at the King Mansion, Brianna was noticing changes too. Lucas had always been quiet at home, reserved. He'd eat dinner in silence, do his homework without complaint, go to bed without fuss. He was a good child, but there was always something missing. A spark, a lightness, joy. But lately, something had shifted. Lucas smiled more. He'd hum while doing his homework. He'd talk excitedly about his day at dinner instead of giving one-word answers. He'd laugh, really laugh at things on TV instead of just staring blankly. And his grades? Brianna had been called in for parent-teacher conferences more times than she could count, always hearing the same things. Lucas is struggling with math. He seems distracted. He's not participating.
But his last report card had shocked her. His math grade had jumped from a D to a B+. His teacher had written, "Lucas has shown remarkable improvement. He's participating in class and seems much more confident." Brianna had stared at that report card for a long time, trying to understand what had changed. Then came the breakfast that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning. Brianna had cleared her schedule specifically to spend time with Lucas. They sat at the kitchen island eating pancakes. Well, Lucas was eating. Brianna was watching him, studying the light in his eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. "Lucas," she said carefully, "I've been thinking. Remember how you've been asking to transfer to a different school?" Lucas looked up, syrup on his chin. "Yeah?" "Well, I spoke with the admissions office at Crestwood Academy. They have a spot for you starting in the fall." Brianna smiled. "You'd start 3rd grade there. New school, new beginning, just like you wanted." She expected him to be excited. He'd been begging her to transfer him for over a year, crying about how the kids were mean, how he didn't fit in, how he hated his school. But Lucas's face fell. "Oh," he said quietly. Brianna frowned. "I thought you'd be happy. You've been asking me to change school since 1st grade." "I know, but..." Lucas pushed his pancakes around his plate. "I don't want to change schools anymore." "What?" Brianna set down her coffee cup, completely thrown. "Lucas, you begged me. You cried about it. What changed?" "I like my school now," Lucas said simply. "I have friends. I'm doing better in my classes. I don't want to leave." Brianna stared at her son, trying to process this. "But when did this happen? How did I not notice?" Lucas shrugged, but there was something in his expression. Happiness. Real, genuine happiness. "I'm okay now, Mom. I don't want to change schools." After Lucas left the table, Brianna sat there in stunned silence. Something had changed her son, something significant, and she had no idea what it was. She'd been so consumed with work, with late nights and early mornings, that she'd missed it entirely, missed the transformation happening right in front of her. The guilt hit her hard. But more than guilt, she felt a desperate need to understand what or who had made such a dramatic difference in Lucas's life. She had to find out. Monday afternoon, Brianna did something she rarely did. She left work at 2:30 and drove to Lucas's school. The secretary seemed shocked to see her. "Miss King, is everything all right?" "Yes, I just need to speak with Lucas's teacher. Is she available?"
Mrs. Fletcher, Lucas's homeroom teacher, welcomed her into the classroom after the students had been dismissed. "Miss King, what a pleasant surprise. Is there something I can help you with?" Brianna sat down at one of the small student desks, feeling awkward in her business suit. I wanted to ask you about Lucas. His grades have improved dramatically. He seems happier, more confident. What changed? Mrs. Fletcher's face lit up. Oh, I'm so glad you noticed. It's been remarkable, really. Lucas has completely come out of his shell. But why? What happened? Well, Mrs. Fletcher said thoughtfully, it started when he became friends with Hazel Porter. She's a wonderful little girl, very brave, very kind. She stood up for Lucas when some boys were bullying him, and they've been inseparable ever since. Hazel Porter, Brianna repeated slowly. Yes, and I think having a real friend has made all the difference. Lucas actually smiles now. He participates. He stands up for himself. Mrs. Fletcher smiled warmly. That little girl gave him something he desperately needed, acceptance. Brianna felt her throat tighten. A 7-year-old girl had done what she, with all her money and resources, couldn't do. Make her son feel whole. I'd like to meet her, Brianna said. Is she still here? I believe her father picks her up around this time. They might still be outside. Brianna thanked the teacher and walked out into the hallway, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor.
She stepped outside into the afternoon sun and scanned the playground. And that's when she saw him, a man in worn jeans and a faded jacket, standing outside a classroom door. He had short brown hair and a kind face. He looked familiar, very familiar. Brianna's steps slowed as recognition hit her like a truck. She knew that face. She'd seen it dozens of times during her late nights at the office. Passing in hallways at 2 a.m., the polite nod, the quiet acknowledgement between two people occupying the same space at odd hours. The janitor from King Industries. No, you can't have his pencil. Leave him alone. Brianna turned toward the voice and saw a little girl with long, curly brown hair standing protectively in front of Lucas inside the classroom. Two boys were backing away, chastened. That must be Hazel. The teacher was already handling the situation, but Brianna's heart twisted watching this small, fierce girl defend her son. The man stepped into the classroom doorway, clearly checking on the commotion. And then he turned. Their eyes met. Brianna watched recognition dawn on his face, the same shock she was feeling. He straightened slightly, suddenly aware of his worn clothes, his casual appearance, the invisible gap between their worlds. For a moment, neither spoke. Boss and employee. Two strangers who'd passed each other in hallways at midnight, now standing in an elementary school at 3 in the afternoon.
Before either could say anything, the kids came running out. Dad! The little girl, Hazel, ran straight to the janitor, wrapping her arms around his waist. You came early! Mom! Lucas appeared right behind her, his face lighting up with pure surprise. What are you doing here? Brianna felt that surprise like a knife to her chest. He was shocked to see her at his school. Lucas grabbed her hand and pulled her forward. Mom, this is Mr. Porter. He's Hazel's dad. He's been helping me with math, and he's really nice. Then Lucas turned to Ryan, beaming. Mr. Porter, this is my mom. The pieces clicked into place for both adults simultaneously. Ryan's face showed pure shock. You're Lucas's mother? Brianna could barely find her voice. And you're Hazel's father? The janitor from her company, the man who mopped her floors at 2 a.m. He was the one who'd transformed her son. Can we go get ice cream together? Lucas asked excitedly, oblivious to the tension. Please, all 4 of us? Hazel bounced on her toes. Please, Dad, Lucas's mom can come too. Brianna and Ryan stood in awkward silence as their children chattered excitedly, building bridges the adults didn't know how to build. Ryan looked uncertain, maybe even afraid she'd say no, that she'd reject him and, by extension, reject the friendship their children had built, because of who he was, what he did for a living. But when Brianna looked at her son, at Lucas's bright, hopeful face, the face of a child who finally felt whole, she knew exactly what to do. She smiled. Ice cream sounds lovely. The ice cream shop was small and family-owned, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and handwritten menus. Brianna looked completely out of place in her $1,000 suit, but she didn't seem to care. The kids ordered their cones and immediately ran to the small park next to the shop, leaving the adults sitting at a wobbly outdoor table. "Thank you," Brianna said quietly, watching Ryan wipe melted chocolate from Hazel's chin before she ran off. "For being kind to my son. His teacher told me about the changes in him. How much you've helped." Ryan shook his head. "Lucas is a great kid. He just needed someone to believe in him." Brianna's eyes glistened. "I've been so absent." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought providing for him, giving him everything money could buy, was enough. But watching him with you and Hazel..." She paused, collecting herself. "You've given him something I couldn't. Presence." Ryan wanted to comfort her, but didn't know how. "It's never too late," he said softly. They sat in silence for a moment, watching their children play. Lucas and Hazel were teaching each other some elaborate hand-clapping game, both laughing when they messed up. "How do you do it?" Brianna asked suddenly. "Single parent, working nights, and still..." She paused, watching Ryan wipe chocolate from Hazel's face with such natural ease. "His teacher said Lucas has completely transformed, and just watching you with them for 20 minutes, I can see why." Ryan gave a rueful smile. "I'm no one special. Most days, I'm barely keeping it together." He watched Hazel spin in circles, her curly hair flying. "But she's my whole world, so I show up, even when I'm exhausted, even when I don't know what I'm doing. I just show up." Something in Brianna's expression shifted, softened. "I'd like to learn how to do that," she said quietly. That ice cream date led to dinner invitations. The first time Brianna and Lucas came to Ryan's apartment for dinner, Ryan was terrified. He cooked spaghetti, simple, affordable. The only thing he knew he wouldn't mess up. The sauce was from a jar, the garlic bread was frozen. But when Brianna took her first bite, she closed her eyes. "This is delicious," she said, and Ryan could tell she meant it. Not because the food was fancy, but because it was made with care. Served at a table where people actually talked to each other, where laughter filled the spaces between words. Brianna seemed more relaxed in their modest home than Ryan imagined she ever was in her mansion.
After dinner, the kids played in Hazel's room while Ryan and Brianna washed dishes together in the tiny kitchen. "Lucas's grades have improved," Brianna said, handing him a plate to dry. "His teacher says he's participating in class now, standing up straighter, making friends. He's a smart kid. He just needed to believe it himself." "You did that." Brianna looked at him. "In a few weeks, you gave him what I couldn't in 7 years." "That's not true." "It is." Her voice was firm. "And I'm not saying it to make you uncomfortable. I'm saying it because I'm grateful, and because I want to learn from you." Over the following weeks, the dinners became a routine. Sometimes at Ryan's place, sometimes they'd order pizza and eat it on the floor while the kids built elaborate pillow forts. Ryan learned that Brianna wasn't just a CEO. She was a woman who'd clawed her way out of poverty and abuse, who'd been cast out by her father when she got pregnant, who'd built an empire to prove she wasn't the worthless girl he'd said she was. She'd buried herself in work, trying to outrun her father's voice, until she'd lost herself completely.
And one night, late after the kids had fallen asleep, she told Ryan the truth she'd been carrying alone. They were sitting at Ryan's kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee that had long gone cold between them. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft sound of the kids breathing from Hazel's room. "Lucas lost his leg because of me," Brianna said suddenly. Ryan looked up, startled. "I was on a business trip, closing some deal that seemed so important at the time. Lucas was home with a nanny. He was climbing, trying to reach something on a high shelf. The bookshelf came down on him. Tears started streaming down her face. If I'd been there, if I hadn't been so obsessed with work, with proving myself..." "Don't," Ryan interrupted firmly. He reached across the table and took her hand without thinking. "You can't carry that. Accidents happen. You being there might not have changed anything. What matters is how you move forward." "How did you do it?" Brianna asked. looking at their joined hands. "After your wife left." Ryan was quiet for a long moment. He'd never talked about this with anyone. 4 years ago, my wife left me for a wealthier man. She was pregnant with his child when she walked out. Left a note saying she'd found someone who could give her the life she deserved. I laughed bitterly. For months, I could barely function. I worked odd jobs, came home to Hazel, tried to keep it together, but inside I was drowning. "What changed?" Brianna whispered. "Hazel needed me." Ryan said simply, "I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. So I learned to be both parents. To braid hair even when my fingers were all thumbs. To have tea parties after double shifts. To be enough even when I felt like I wasn't." He looked up at Brianna. "But it wasn't easy. Some days I still feel like I'm barely holding on." "You make it look effortless," Brianna said. "That's because you're seeing the result, not the struggle." Ryan squeezed her hand gently. "You want to learn to be present. Start small. One bedtime story. One dinner where you put your phone away. One morning where you drive Lucas to school instead of sending a car. Small moments build into big changes." They talked until 3 in the morning, two wounded people finding unexpected understanding in each other. When Brianna finally left, Ryan stood at his door watching her car disappear from sight, and in that moment he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope, and maybe something more dangerous. Connection. Summer arrived like a gift. Brianna started cutting back on work, leaving the office at 6 instead of midnight. She picked Lucas up from school herself, attended his baseball games, had dinner with him every night, and she started spending time with Ryan and Hazel too. Some evenings they'd all go to the park. Ryan would push both kids on the swings while Brianna sat on a bench, actually relaxed for the first time in years. Other times, Brianna would invite them to her house, a mansion that had always felt cold and empty but was now filled with laughter and warmth. Ryan watched Brianna transform. She smiled more, played with Lucas instead of watching from a distance, let herself be imperfect, make mistakes, be human. And somewhere between those dinners and coffee dates and school events, Ryan fell in love. He tried to fight it. She was his boss. Well, former boss now. He'd gotten a call from a better firm in August and given his notice at King Industries. But even with that obstacle removed, there was still the impossible gulf between their worlds. She was a CEO. He was a warehouse supervisor. She lived in a mansion. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. She wore designer clothes. He shopped at thrift stores. But the heart doesn't care about logic. The kids, Ryan later learned, had been playing matchmakers the entire time. One afternoon, he overheard them in Lucas's room during a playdate. "Do you think they like each other?" Hazel whispered. "I think so," Lucas said, "but my mom smiles at her phone now. She never used to do that." "Your mom is really pretty," Hazel said thoughtfully, "and my dad is the best dad in the world. They'd be perfect together." "We should make them go on more dates," Lucas suggested, "like without us, so they can actually talk." "Operation Parent Romance," Hazel giggled. Ryan had stood outside the door, torn between laughter and tears. His 7-year-old daughter was trying to find him love. Christmas Eve arrived with snow and possibility. Brianna had invited them over to decorate her tree, a 12-foot monstrosity that Ryan had to use a ladder to reach the top of. The kids had insisted on putting every ornament on themselves, which meant the bottom half of the tree was overloaded while the top remained bare. It was perfect. By 9 o'clock, both kids had passed out on the couch, exhausted from excitement and hot chocolate. Ryan and Brianna stood in the soft glow of the tree lights, close enough that he could smell her perfume. "Ryan," Brianna said softly, "I'm tired of being afraid." "Afraid of what?" he asked, though he knew. "Of living in the box everyone else built for me, of caring what people think about our different worlds, of not following my heart because of social status." She looked up at him, vulnerable and brave. "I'm falling in love with you.
I think I have been since that first ice cream date. Ryan's breath caught. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. Brianna, if this is one-sided, tell me now, she whispered. But if you feel even a fraction of what He kissed her, poured 6 months of longing and hope and fear into that kiss. When they broke apart, both were crying. I love you, Ryan said, his voice rough. I've been terrified to say it. You're brilliant and successful and none of that matters. Brianna finished. Not compared to how you make me feel, how you've changed my life, how you've loved my son like he was your own. They stood there holding each other while snow fell outside the window. Two broken people who'd found unexpected wholeness in each other. They dated for 2 years. Real, committed, building a life together dating. Ryan faced skepticism from some of Brianna's business associates, but she shut it down immediately, making clear that Ryan was her partner in every sense.
They moved slowly, carefully, making sure the kids were comfortable every step of the way. But Hazel and Lucas were thrilled, already calling themselves siblings, already planning their future as a family. The summer of their 2nd year together, Ryan proposed at the same park where they'd had their first ice cream date. It was simple and perfect. Down on one knee, in front of both kids, asking Brianna to build a life with him. When she said yes through happy tears, Lucas and Hazel squealed and tackled them both in a group hug. They celebrated with ice cream, just like their first date, laughing and making plans for their future as a family. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Ryan had ever seen Brianna. She was glowing, constantly smiling. She'd hum while cooking dinner, laugh freely at the kids' jokes, fall asleep on Ryan's shoulder during movie nights with a peaceful expression he'd never seen before. She was finally free, finally happy, finally living instead of just surviving. That's why, 2 weeks after the proposal, when Ryan let himself into her house and heard quiet sobbing coming from upstairs, his heart dropped. He found her sitting on the floor of her bedroom, knees pulled to her chest, a letter crumpled in her hand. Tears streamed down her face. Brianna! Ryan dropped beside her immediately, alarmed. She'd been so happy lately. What could have broken through that light? What happened? What's wrong? She looked up at him with red, swollen eyes and held out the letter with shaking hands. My father, she whispered. He's in the hospital, dying. His wife called and said he's been asking for me. Ryan pulled her close, understanding flooding through him. What do you want to do? I don't know, she said, her voice breaking. Part of me wants to let him die alone, like he made me feel. But another part... She clutched Ryan's shirt. I need closure, Ryan. I need to face him, but I'm terrified. She'd avoided him for over a decade. The man who'd called her worthless, who'd thrown her out when she got pregnant, who'd tried to destroy her before she even had a chance to live. Ryan held her tighter. Then I'll go with you. You don't have to do this alone. She shook her head. No. This is something I need to do by myself. She looked up at him. But knowing you'll be here when I get back, that's what gives me the courage to go. Then go, Ryan said softly. Face him, get your closure, and come home to us. So she went. She drove 3 hours to the hospital where her father lay dying, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. Ryan stayed home with both kids, his phone in his hand, waiting. 3 days passed. 3 days of Ryan checking his phone every few minutes. 3 days of wondering if Brianna was okay. 3 days of worry gnawing at him. Then, on the 3rd evening, he heard the front door open. Brianna stood in the doorway, and Ryan's breath caught. She looked different, lighter, like someone had lifted a weight she'd been carrying her entire life. "Brianna!" Ryan crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She held him tight, and when she pulled back, her eyes were bright, not with tears of sadness, but something else. Relief. Peace. "I told him everything," she said, her voice steady. "I walked into that hospital room and I let it all out. Every terrible thing he ever said to me, every time he made me feel worthless, the day he threw me out when I needed him most, all the years I spent trying to prove I wasn't the failure he said I was."
"What did he say?" Ryan asked softly. "At first, nothing. He just laid there, looking at me." Brianna's voice cracked slightly. "Then he cried. My father, the man who never showed emotion, who ruled with cruelty, he actually cried." She sat down on the couch, and Ryan sat beside her, holding her hand. "He apologized," Brianna continued, almost in disbelief. "He said he was wrong, that I was never worthless, that he was a bitter, angry man who destroyed everything good in his life, including me. He said he was proud of me, that I'd become everything he never could be." "How do you feel?" Ryan asked. "Free," Brianna whispered. "For the first time in my life, I feel free." She looked up at Ryan. "I told him I forgave him, not for his sake, for mine. I needed to let go of that anger. It was poisoning me. I'm so proud of you." "There's more," Brianna said. "He asked if he could meet Lucas. He wants to meet his grandson before—" She didn't finish the sentence. 2 days later, Brianna took Lucas to the hospital. Lucas had been asking about his grandfather for years. Why he'd never met him. Why Grandma and Grandpa never visited. Why other kids had grandparents and he didn't. Brianna had always avoided the question, the pain too raw to explain. But now, sitting in the car outside the hospital, she looked at her son. "Lucas, there's something you need to know about Grandpa. He wasn't always kind. He hurt me when I was younger. But he's different now, and he wants to meet you." Lucas looked up at her with those serious 7-year-old eyes. "Did he say he was sorry?" "Yes, baby, he did." "Then I want to meet him." The month that followed was unexpected. Lucas visited his grandfather 3 times a week. They talked about baseball, Lucas's favorite sport, about books, about school, about the prosthetic leg Lucas wore, and how it made him special, not less. Brianna watched her father transform into someone she'd never known. Patient, kind, present. He'd ask Lucas about his day and actually listen. He'd laugh at Lucas's jokes. He'd tell him stories about when Brianna was young, the good memories she'd forgotten existed. "Your mom is the strongest person I know," he told Lucas one afternoon, his voice weak but clear. "She survived me, and she became something extraordinary. You're lucky to have her." Lucas nodded seriously. "I know. And now I have Mr. Porter, too. He's going to be my dad." Brianna's father smiled. "Then you're the luckiest boy in the world." 4 weeks after that first visit, Brianna got the call. Her father had passed peacefully in his sleep. When she hung up the phone, she didn't cry tears of sadness. She cried tears of relief, of gratitude, because her father had died happy, at peace with himself, and she'd been given something she never thought possible: closure. Lucas had gotten to know his grandfather, had a month of memories with him, had heard his mother's name spoken with pride instead of contempt. And Brianna, for the first time in her life, felt at peace with her past. The anger was gone. The bitterness had dissolved. The weight she'd carried since childhood had finally lifted. She was free, and she was ready to build a future without the shadows of the past hanging over her. Their wedding took place on Christmas Eve, exactly 2 years after their first kiss. The venue is decorated simply, white lights and winter flowers, because they'd both learned that happiness wasn't found in extravagance, but in presence. Hazel and Lucas walked down the aisle together as the flower girl and ring bearer, grinning at each other like they'd orchestrated the whole thing, which, in a way, they had.
When Brianna walked toward Ryan, he couldn't stop his tears. This beautiful, strong woman who'd let herself be vulnerable, who'd chosen love over status, presence over perfection. "You saved me," she whispered when she reached him. "No," Ryan whispered back. "We saved each other." Their vows were simple but profound. Brianna promised to always show up, to never let work consume her, to build a life rich in moments rather than money. Ryan promised to love Lucas as his own, to support her dreams, to remind her daily that she was never the worthless girl her father had claimed. When they were pronounced married, the small gathering erupted in applause. But Ryan only had eyes for his new family, his daughter beaming with pride, his new son jumping excitedly, and his wife, tears streaming down her face, smiling like she'd finally found home. As the night wound down, the four of them stood together, looking at the winter sky through the venue's glass ceiling. Lucas held Brianna's hand while leaning against Ryan's side. Hazel was draped across Ryan's other arm, sleepy and content. "We did good, didn't we?" Brianna asked softly. "We did great," Ryan replied, kissing her temple. "We built something real."
"Dad," Lucas asked sleepily, "when we go to Disney World next week, can Hazel and I share a room?" "Are you kidding?" Hazel mumbled, her eyes still closed. "We're going to have our own rooms so we can stay up late and plan adventures. Someone has to make sure you two don't spend the whole trip being all mushy." The adults laughed, and Ryan felt a completeness he'd never imagined possible. From the ashes of betrayal and loneliness, from the darkness of abuse and absence, something beautiful had grown. Not because they were perfect, but because they'd shown up for each other. Because a little girl with curly brown hair had been brave enough to stand up for a lonely boy. Because a janitor had loved without judgment. Because a CEO had learned to let go of her pain and embrace vulnerability. As snow began to fall gently outside, Ryan looked at his wife, his daughter, his son, and realized that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary moments. Friends, if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, if it reminded you of the power we all have to change someone's life with a simple act of kindness, please don't just watch and walk away. Hit that subscribe button and join our Soul Lift Stories family for more stories that restore your faith in humanity. Share the story with someone who needs to remember that kindness is never wasted.